I don't know how many of you are Star Wars fans. Okay, that was off to a good start, all right. But there's this great scene from The Empire Strikes Back, and you can find the clip on YouTube. And I've watched it a number of times this week, and it's at the same time both very dated and timeless. Luke Skywalker, okay, thank you. Luke Skywalker is being trained as a Jedi, and he's being trained by the now well-loved and well-known Yoda. And they're in the swamp, jungle, creepy, misty, mysterious place. And they come upon a cave. And Luke can feel that there's something not right coming from the cave. He can sense it. There's a coldness. And so he asks Yoda. Luke says, "What's in there?" And Yoda says, "Only what you take with you." Luke bends down and starts to pick up his weapons and his belt and starts to gird himself with all his weapons. And Yoda says, "Your weapons? You will not need them." So Luke goes into the cave, this underworld, this dark, ominous place. And the music begins. And he sees Darth Vader, at least an apparition of Darth Vader, Luke's nemesis, the representation of the dark side of the Force. And they begin to duel in a lightsaber match. And pretty quickly, Luke decapitates Darth Vader. His helmet, the mask, comes off, and it falls to the ground. The camera goes right to the mask, and all of a sudden, that mask kind of explodes open. And what Luke sees is his own face. What's in the cave? Only what you take with you. Facing and confronting our own selves is perhaps one of the most difficult battles that any of us can face. It's like the poem that Crystal read by David White. The half turn of your face is the one movement you will not make. Having done it once, you do not want to go down that path again. Why? Because sometimes seeing yourself, or I'll speak for myself, seeing myself, facing my own truth, confronting who I am at times is not only scary, it's downright painful. I think I'd rather be in the swampy jungle than do that most days. Why? Because the cave is frightening. Unknown, even. And I don't know about you, but this year, sheltering in place, there were days I felt like I was just going into my own cave. I had to be away from everybody else, but I couldn't get away from myself. There were days that I felt like I couldn't take 2 steps, but I fell down. There were days that I felt like a complete and utter failure. Name the category, I felt like I was failing in it. And you all know how much I love to fail about things. You know, failure has become a little vogue in our society. You know what I mean by that? Fail fast, fail often. But what we haven't done is really sometimes look at still how painful failure can be, or the feeling like we're failing. And the rising strong process that Brene Brown talks about is about rising strong again and again from those times we fall down. Because you know what? What you can depend on? We'll fall down. She says the rising strong process is 3 things. 1, reckoning, walking into our own stories. We're going to talk about that today. The second is rumbling, getting honest about the stories that we make up. I talked about this at the end of June. The stories that we make up, and challenge assumptions to find out, like, what is true and what am I just making up. And the third thing, she calls it revolution. I just want to call it rising. Write a new ending to the story. A braver story, transforming how we engage with each other and how we engage with the world. And I would add how we engage with ourselves. And rising strong, she says, and I know it to be true, is a spiritual practice. It's a spiritual practice. Spirituality which brings a sense of perspective, of meaning and purpose to our lives. And when we enter the reckoning stage that we'll talk about today, reckoning is that process of calculating where we are. The etymology of the word simply means to make an account. Reckoning, engaging with our emotions, and also coming to understand what is the strong feeling behind these emotions. Because when we can reckon and recognize those things, we face that instead of offloading our hurt onto other people. When we reckon, we can maybe let go of some resentment. Wow, how about that? Well, Brene Brown says you either walk into your story and own your truth, or you live outside of that story and hustle for your worthiness. And she said, our job is not to deny the story, but to deny the ending. Our job is not to deny that story, but to deny the ending. And I want you to know, church, that I am, to the best of my ability, on this journey with you. I'm not asking you to do anything today that I am not deep in the middle of myself. You know, we have a complicated relationship to emotions in our society. At one level, we're over-therapized, right? We have a lot of psychological language. But at another level, we also dismiss things. Why? Because we say, oh, that's self-indulgent. Or we don't want to be vulnerable. Who here loves to be vulnerable? Right? And we're all different. Some of us feel very free using what I would call more emotional language, and others of us don't. And I'm working so hard to make this accessible to everyone, because this is not about touchy-feely. This is about our own soul's journey, spiritually. And how to really get to a place where we can be present to ourselves so that we can be present with others. Some of you might easily say, well, I feel, and others of you might say, I think, or others might say, I am experiencing. Whatever language you use is great, as long as we all do the work internally together. And why is this so important? Because only in reckoning with our own stories or what's really going on in us can we stop offloading it to others. Did you ever have an experience where you were like, wow, that was an overreaction? Well, if you haven't, you can maybe have someone in your life tell you that, because let's just say I've had a few times lately when someone has lovingly said to me, don't you think that was a little overreaction? And sometimes that happens when we hang on to hurt. We also avoid hurt, or we numb hurt. We numb it. How? Really? I don't need to tell anyone, do I? Alcohol, food, shopping, Netflix. Seven seasons later. And none of those things are harmful in themselves. But this statement is what got me so much this week. When we numb the dark, we numb the light. And then sometimes we just stockpile hurt. It's like we have this little bag on our side, carry around, and when somebody hurts us, we put that in it. And somebody else says something, we put that in it. Just get this bag full of things, And then all of a sudden, there's an overreaction, just take them all out. But when we enter into a rising strong process, then we can reckon with ourselves, face what's really going on. Jesus said, you will realize the truth, and the truth will set you free. And you may be like Jesus' disciples, who said right away, what are you talking about? I'm free. I'm nobody's slave. Often we are held captive by our own stories, by our own unexpressed hurt, by the resentments that we hold, and we are not free in that sense. Last week I talked about, I believe that Jesus believed that people were doing the best that they could. And from that place of unconditional love and acceptance, he called them to transform, to grow. But he also, from that place of unconditional love and acceptance, made them confront themselves. He said to the woman at the well, you have 5 husbands. He said to the men who were wanting to stone the woman caught in adultery, so to speak, with their arms raised, he simply turned and said, whoever is without sin, go ahead, cast the first stone. He said to the rich young ruler, who said to him, I have loved God, I have kept all the commandments. And Jesus just looked at him with love and said, you're owned by your possessions. Those and your wealth you love more than these. To reckon with ourselves, I just want to give you one simple step in the process. And I invite you to get curious. Curious about your own story, your own emotions, your own reactions. Curious and simply saying, wow, I wonder what's going on with me. We say that about other people when they're in a state, don't we? Whoa, wonder what's going on with her. Somebody's having a bad day. But can we turn that in on ourselves and be curious? Curious in a way that is also self-loving. Because what if we could move from judgment to curiosity? Wouldn't that be freeing? Judgment to curiosity. That's about self-loving. It's about transformation. And curiosity can be uncomfortable because there's an uncertainty to it. But it is life-giving. Curiosity about yourself is not only loving yourself, but it's also an act of faith. Because faith shines brightest. Faith does its best work in uncertainty. Remember what Paul Tillich says? The opposite of faith is not doubt. The opposite of faith is certainty. Faith shines bright in uncertainty and in curiosity. And we need Spirit's help to be brave enough to want to know more. Emotions, friends, aren't everything, but they reveal a story. A story about our lives, a story about how we are with others, and a story even about how we look at ourselves. What better place to do some reckoning? What better place to rise strong than in spiritual community together? The Christian tradition talks a lot about salvation, which is really just about wholeness. Wholeness, and I don't know about you, but I long to be whole. And I long to do the work along with Spirit that leads me to that place of wholeness so that my actions and my behaviors, and yes, my thoughts even, can align more with the person that I want to be in the world. And I know you want that too. So rather than offload, we integrate. Because all of our lives, even the parts of us that we don't like so much, have shaped us to who we are in this moment. The truth will set you free, and you will be made whole over and over again. Yoda says, what's in the cave? Only what you take with you. Well, let's add a little wisdom from Jesus also. Go into the cave, but you don't go alone. You go with the presence of the one who calls you beloved. The one who's accepted you when you cannot accept yourself. And when you walk into the cave, that presence is there as well. So let's reckon that we might be set free in every way that we need to, that we might be made whole over and over again. Amen.